Did you know Fast Growing Trees is America's largest and most trusted online nursery with thousands of trees and plants and over 2 million happy customers? Whether you're planting fruit trees, adding privacy, brightening things up with flowers, or bringing in houseplants, Fast Growing Trees has it all. Even better, they can help you find options that are right for your climate, your space, and lifestyle. Click Order Grow. Every plant arrives healthy with the Alive and Thrive guarantee straight to your door. So if you're ready to get planting, this is the moment. Right now, they have great deals on spring planting essentials, up to half off on select plants. And listeners to our show get 20% off their first purchase when using the code WWO at checkout. That's an additional 20% off. Better plants and better growing at fastgrowingtrees.com using the code WWO at checkout. Fastgrowingtrees.com, code WWO. Now's the perfect time to plant. Let's grow together. Use WWO to save today. Offer is valid for a limited time. Terms and conditions apply. Go to growingfasttrees.com for details.
Welcome to All About Agatha, the podcast dedicated to reading and ranking every single mystery novel written by the Queen of Crime, Dame Agatha Christie. I am Kemper Donovan, and I'm very excited to bring you a really quite lovely interview that I did with mystery writer Margot Douaihy. That's coming in just a minute or two, but a few housekeeping matters I wanted to run through with all of you first. Perhaps most importantly, I have one big ol' spoiler warning for my conversation with Margot. We thoroughly spoiled the murder of Roger Ackroyd in our conversation, but that was the only title that we spoiled, so be aware. I also do want to let listeners know that we bring up the topic of suicide, so just be aware of that as well. I should mention, because I haven't mentioned it for a few episodes, that there are still tickets available to my 2 upcoming events at the Agatha Christie Festival in September in England, in Turkey. I will be doing another balloon debate panel on Agatha Christie's Greatest Narrator. That is on Friday, the 18th of September from 3 to 4 p.m., My co-panelists will be Brad Friedman, Jamie Berntal-Hooker, Tina Hodgkinson, and Victoria Dowd. I cannot wait for that event. It will be a lot of fun. And then the next day, on Saturday, the 19th of September, much later in the day, from 7:30 to 10:30 p.m., also in the Spanish Barn, both these events are in the Spanish Barn in Torquay, I will be hosting a game show. There are actually going to be 2 game shows that evening. One is more of a mastermind style game show, which will feature a few brave superfans, but then I am hosting a panel game show featuring a number of guest experts. And I believe we're still finalizing exactly who those panelists are, but it's a lot of people who you have heard from on this very podcast, and it's going to be so much fun, and I cannot wait to quiz them and hopefully stump them, much to their and our delight. I'll be doing a live episode for the balloon debate panel, but the quiz show is not going to be recorded. So if you would like to experience that one, you are just going to have to attend for yourself. I've put a link in the show notes for all those who might be able to plan a trip, and I hope to see you there. On a more personal promotional note, as many of you are aware, the 3rd book in my Ghostwriter Mysteries series is coming out this summer. I'm in the midst of setting a number of events for the book's release. I'm not going to go through them now because we're still a little ways out, but I just wanted to give you all here in the United States a heads up because I want to make it as easy as possible for you to attend. I'm actually going to be in San Antonio, Texas on Thursday, May 7th. That's at the Mountains and Plains Independent Booksellers Association. And San Antonio is not a place I have been before as an author or as a person. I'm actually very excited to go to San Antonio. I'm headed for the Alamo in a week or 2. Very cool. But starting in June and July, I will start doing some promotional events for that 3rd book, which is titled Sweet Spot. It features a locked room mystery, a body found on a seemingly impregnable compound in the American Southwestern Desert. We are in southern Utah here for the 3rd Ghostwriter. I do love reinventing the setting each and every time. That was one of the reasons I was so keen on doing these books, my Sidekick series, where I get to plop my Ghostwriter into a different world in each book. It's so much fun. There are, of course, several Agatha Christie novels that inspired me while I was writing the book. There are always several Agatha Christie novels and stories that inspire me whenever I write a mystery. But there is one in particular that was a direct inspiration for the puzzle. And, I was able to just call it out with loose lips that this was in many ways my homage to Death on the Nile. That was very obvious from page 1. In this case, I think it would be a little spoilery, especially for all you Agatha Christie superfans out there, all you listeners, if I told you which Christie inspired me. So maybe that's something that we can discuss when you are on the other side of this book. Because I also don't think the inspiration is obvious on its face. It's one of those instances where you really need to appreciate the underpinning of Christie's puzzles, the mechanics. I am being deliberately cryptic here. Yes, I am trying to tantalize, entice you, get you to pre-order that book. Link in the show notes. I'm just really excited for this book to make its way out into the world and for you all to experience it. So I'll let you know closer to June and July about those dates specifically, but just know that I'm going to be in New England in the middle of July, in Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, and actually back to Massachusetts. And then I will be doing a number of events in the Midwest. I'm actually going to be in Chicago and Wisconsin and Minnesota and a few other places as well. I'm really getting all over the place this summer for Sweet Spot. So please do check out my news and events page on my website. I have provided a link directly to that page in the show notes of this episode, and you will hear more from me about that in future episodes. I think that's enough preamble. Let's get to this wonderful conversation that I had with Margot, which starts right now. I am delighted to have a contemporary author of crime fiction on the podcast today. Margot Douaihy is a professor of creative writing at Emerson College in Massachusetts, here in the United States, who received her PhD in creative writing from the University of Lancaster in the United Kingdom. And in addition to being a published poet, she is the author of the award-winning, nationally best-selling Sister Holiday series of mysteries, which currently consists of 3 titles: Scorched Grace in 2023, which won the Pinkley Prize in crime fiction, in addition to all sorts of other praise and awards. Blessed Water in 2024, which was named one of the New York Times' best crime novels of that year, and which also won the Publishing Triangle's Joseph Hansen Award for LGBTQ+ crime writing. And this year, in 2026, her third Sister Holiday mystery, Divine Ruin, which is out now, and which we will be talking about in this conversation. All 3 of these books follow Sister Holiday, a tattooed, gold-toothed, chain-smoking, punk rock, queer nun who takes no prisoners as she solves various crimes from within the wicked, steamy heat of New Orleans, where she teaches music at St. Sebastian's School, a place that figures directly into many of her adventures. Holiday is her first name, by the way. Her civilian name, as it were, is Holiday Walsh. I mention that because I feel like for many listeners, their frame of reference when it comes to a crime-solving religious figure is G.K. Chesterton's Father Brown, where Brown is definitely his last name. So just FYI. I am fresh off my read of Divine Ruin, and listeners, I fell in love with Margot's writing while I was reading this novel. It is brash and funny and surprising and devastating and lyrical and just drop-dead gorgeous. And for me, this book felt like a mashup of the noir and whodunit genres in a way I haven't really seen before, because it manages to feature both the sort of stylized, memorable prose one might find in a Chandler or Kane noir story, dealing head-on with various societal ills. There are lots of seedy underbellies exposed in the course of these books. In Divine Ruin, it's the selling of drugs to vulnerable teenagers, for instance. So that's all very noir, but all of this is happening in the pursuance of a clued puzzle with an amateur sleuth at its helm, a la our very own Christie. I have it on good authority that Margot is a big Agatha Christie fan. How could she not be? It was obvious to me while I was reading her book that she loves Christie, and you all know what a big compliment that is coming from me. I apologize for this lengthy introduction, but welcome to the show, Margot.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much, Kemper. I am smiling ear to ear. I feel like I am genuflecting to your love of Christie, to the gifts that you give, is not only an extraordinary novelist, but just a deeply fresh contributor to this lineage that we love so much and that continues to inspire me. The more I invest in Christie's oeuvre and in fresh writers like you, the more I want to learn. It's like I can never learn enough. And I don't know if listeners can feel that vibe, but it's like I want all of the books. I want every Christie. I'll even deal with a lackluster screen adaptation if it just gives me something to throw shade on, if you know what I'm saying. I love this world. I love being part of it. It's one of the greatest punk blessings of my life. So when I saw the invite from you, I literally screamed. So thanks, Kim.
Oh, that's amazing. I love how you put that too about like we'll read anything, we'll watch anything, because it's like we just want to taste, right? Like just even the tiniest bit, we're like, yes, please. We're so desperate, especially after you've read all of the main texts, right? It's just like however I can get a little bit more, I'll take it. I just have to ask you how you first came to encounter Agatha Christie and what she meant to you both as a mystery reader and then later a mystery writer. I know that's a fairly broad question, so do with that what you will.
It's one of my favorite questions. So I never feel like I answer it, as lushly as I feel it, but I'll have a go. Sunday nights, PBS mystery, Edward Gorey intro. Yep. Alan Cumming was I think the later intro host, but Sunday nights, PBS mystery, Marple, Poirot. Every incarnation of. Well, I have my favorites, of course, but the David Suchet, music of the intro is like, I think, stitched into the double helix DNA of mine. I was probably the only child in Scranton, Pennsylvania who dressed as Poirot for Halloween. I might win that prize. But, I come from a long line of mystery lovers, and my folks are very different. They have different aesthetic interests. Like my mom's an artist. My dad he's also loves art, but he's like an accountant, so he has more of a mathematical approach to life. But he does appreciate art. But the mystery through Agatha Christie's lens was the unifying force in our family, even more so than other kinds of crime fiction. So certain things were a little bit too gory, for example, for maybe my mom's taste. But that Venn diagram overlap of the logical deduction, the ratiocination puzzle of a Christie screen, adaptation. I actually worked my way through the books through being a viewer as a kid. So I came to the reading after watching, and just that presentation of the kind of PBS aesthetic is really just so near and dear to my heart. Of course, then reading the text and reading the line level of what Christie's doing, how funny she is, how cheeky, how subversive. And we'll talk about this with the murder of Roger Ackroyd, but just what a treat to love this world through watching these mysteries and then loving them even more by reading them. But lifelong, like the adage, the lifelong listener, first time caller is like, it is so legit. And it also continues to be true. Like all these years later, in my 40s with my parents, having aged, and we all still just have that same childlike zeal for anything Agatha Christie, except, I don't know if it's a third rail, but the most recent Seven Dials adaptation on Netflix, I found a little lacking, though I liked the primary thrusts of the main character. Anyway, that's the intro.
No, I love that. Well, and what's great about that too is, as you know, as a longtime listener of the podcast, obviously this podcast started as a partnership with my late partner and co-host Catherine Brobeck, and there were so many ways in which we were a good point counterpoint when it came to Christie, Catherine was all about Poirot. I'm all about Miss Marple, even though we obviously love them both. But the big one really is that I approached the Agatha Christie, or I was introduced to her first through the texts, then the screen adaptations. But Catherine was like you. She was very much the screen adaptations. And then she came to the text as a result of her love of those, for the most part, also the televised adaptations, the Suchet series, the Hickson series. And I love how Agatha Christie is just one of the few authors where that is entirely valid, because it's part of the joy of Christie that there's this just adaptational landscape that is as robust as the books, and that pretty much, with a couple of little holes here and there, everything has made it onto the screen. So you can do it that way, and it's another entry point into Christie, and one that I think a lot of people have taken, and it's one of the reasons that she's as accessible as she is. So
I love that. I totally concur. Yeah, I'm still waiting. Was The Man in the Brown Suit ever adapted? I love that Anne Bedingfield story. I think it's
there is an 80s The Man in the Brown Suit. Rue McClanahan, Blanche.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah, Blanche Devereaux herself is in. You need to right after this interview. I think you need to stream some Man in the Brown Suit. But I feel like it is long overdue for a fresh adaptation. That's for sure.
Oh, I just love what you said, that the landscape is just and that is a real skill, and another kind of testament to the OG for creating something that can be scaled up, scaled down, kind of wildly aestheticized, or twisted, turned. It's just, to me, it's actually, again, it goes back to some of the magic in the plot mechanics, as well as just a strong commitment to her vision in the books, that I feel like is just what a treat also for folks getting their hands on this IP. The most recent Witness to the Prosecution, and then There Were None, I thought were just stunning. Sarah, I can't remember the
Sarah
show.
Phelps.
But it's so dark and sumptuous, and again, totally different than some of the other adaptations that I've seen. And I think that's just such a joy for a fan, of course, but then just anyone kind of entering into this space and realizing, wow, these texts are 90 years old, 100 years old. It's still so fresh in terms of what they offer about the human psyche and making choices and seeing what we want to see, and all of those attendant concerns.
Yeah. Well, because there's something fundamental about them, and they're never going to grow out of style because of that. Because she was talking about the human condition. I mean, albeit in the lightest, most entertaining way possible. You don't even realize it as you're reading those books, especially if you come to them when you're younger. Which is also why I love that you can read Christie a certain way when you're 10 or 11 or 12, and then you can continue to read her throughout your life and just get something else out of it. And then as these adaptations come out and take different turns. I love those two specific Sarah Phelpses as well, especially in Then There Were None. I mean, Sarah Phelps is a very controversial figure, I feel like, within the world of Agatha Christie adaptations, because some of the later adaptations perhaps fell off a little bit, or there were some even more interesting choices made for some of those others. But I do think in Then There Were None, and also Witness for the Prosecution, I'm a big fan of that adaptation as well. And even the ABC Murders. I like her version of the ABC Murders for some of what it was doing. That's the one with John Malkovich as Poirot.
Yes. What a bold choice. I'm still metabolizing that one.
Fair enough.
I think that part of part of the excitement is that it's so alive still. It's unsettled. It's contested in a way. And yet, of course, there are these ways that we can ask about fidelity to the original text, which is just so much fun.
Well, do you have a favorite Agatha Christie novel? I know you're a big Murder of Roger Ackroyd fan, but I'm just curious if you have a favorite.
Oh, gosh. I think it has to be this one. I think it has to be The Murder of Roger Ackroyd, because I just feel like it changed so much of how I thought about even what I would consider clue work, or, the actual engineering of the puzzle. So it just continues to inspire me. I find something new in it every time I read it, reread it. And that, as you mentioned, like the light touch in terms of some of the critiques of like even abuse, with the discovery that Ashley Ferrars was probably abusive, and the idea of, I don't know, holding some space for the claustrophobia of the village and Caroline and her cronies and gossip and you know making these humorous and kind of extraordinarily cheeky observations, but underneath them for our narrator, kind of taking these jabs about these parentheticals that are just so choice, but perhaps underneath that, again, the fear as we learn about what he has done and how he's getting himself out of this hole through the ultimate twist, as it were. I just think it's just such a master stroke of craft, but it's also just so much funnier than I ever would have imagined. This essentially very long, I don't know how many pages it is. I have the book in front of me. 200 and some page, essentially suicide note, yeah. When you kind of really look down to what the materiality of the book itself is, as we learned in the last couple of pages, it's stunning, it's striking, it's very punk rock to me. And I love punk. I like punk aesthetics, and I like that as an ethos in a way. It's almost like there's a lot of anarchy in this book.
Yeah. Well, that's what I love about your books, which is that I can tell that this is someone who has ingested Agatha Christie and gotten it and understands what's going on. And then you're bringing up some of those elements to the surface in a very contemporary way, and being contemporary and being tethered to a specific place and a specific time is very Christie. This is a drum that I beat practically on every episode, or when you go into the texts and you see how engaged she was with the world in which she was living and how much her books changed over the decades, and, how she would be commenting on the war or on, what was happening in the 1960s, et cetera. So she was someone who very much had her eyes open. And I just think, for anyone also who chooses to write a mystery from the first person perspective, so you're sort of writing within that, tradition where she began with Hastings seemingly as a Watson stand-in, but then pulled off, these brilliant, ingenious tricks with something like A Murder of Roger Ackroyd. I just feel the Christie infused in the Sister Holiday mysteries. But I have to ask you, how did the concept for this series come about? Since, a punk rock nun with a major potty mouth is not necessarily the most obvious choice for an amateur sleuth. And I'm sure there are many people that, might read this and think, if they're not thinking deeply enough, I think about what you're doing or what Agatha Christie is doing, be like, I don't see any Agatha Christie in here. She didn't write like that. And fair enough, you have your own voice. You're writing in your voice. But I just would love if you could talk about how this series came into being.
Oh, absolutely. And thanks for asking. Every single thing you're saying, I'm just nodding so hard to. I love your takes on just about everything in this synthesis. So as much as I love everything Christie, even within that wide, kind of capacious space, because she's writing across, I think, even different modalities too, which is just so delicious. Even giving, for example, the chapter names in The Murder of Roger Ackroyd, The Truth, Nothing But the Truth, and Who's Who in King's Abbot. But so for her formal diversity and aesthetic diversity, even with the kind of through lines that we know of, despite all of that, as a fan, when I sat down to write my series, I was more interested in the hard-boiled voice. So the P.I. Marlowe, Sam Spade, even the, Walter Huff of James M. Cain, Double Indemnity, hard-living, hard-nosed, hard-boiled, snarky on the outside, some internal terror and vulnerability on the inside under, that armor. And with that, I love tropes. I think they're a language that we speak. I think they are capable of incredible harm and capable of incredible emancipation when we reimagine them and reconfigure them. So I loved that idea of the kind of hard-boiled lone wolf who's out on the mean streets, pounding the pavement for some kind of a case or a client, but then also a way to bring in the satisfying clicking puzzle pieces into place that you would see in a Agatha Christie mystery. So I wanted to merge them. And, for me, that the figure of that sort of a loner, insider, outsider, although she does work with a quote unquote authority figure, also reimagined in the books as a PI and a former arson investigator, Magnolia Reveau. I wanted my sleuth to be someone who is a mystery to herself in many ways, but also kind of hurtling through these cases and the narrative cartography, but just hurtling through life in a very nuanced way. I love inner contradictions of people. I feel like they're very real, very human, and I like to bring that to daylight, even in the noir darkness and like bloodbath way. So I thought honoring, kind of a P.I. Marlowe, loner, jerk kind of guy who's also very magnetic, and import all of that into the first person, very, intimate shorthand of a nun, but a countercultural nun. So again, someone who's a bit of a mystery to herself. She's 33 years old. She's genuinely hot-tempered individual who has addiction issues, and she's genuinely pious. She genuinely believes in Jesus Christ and is a Catholic. And so she makes not a lot of sense to her punk bandmates in Brooklyn. And then when she leaves her life in Brooklyn and moves to New Orleans to join the convent, which is a bit of my kind of tribute to a sort of a St. Mary Mead closed environment within, a larger shifting space beyond that micro. So like a micro within the macro. And so it was more of that hard-boiled direction that I really wanted to chase with Sister Holiday.
Yeah. Well, I'm so glad that I was reading that correctly, that you're
100%
mind those two things, because
100%.
It feels like it. And I've certainly read, more modern noir-y stuff, but like it often does not have the cluing, and it doesn't have the sort of the puzzly sort of aspect of things, which it feels very important to you as well. And to get both of those as a joy, because I don't talk about it that much on this podcast, but I love noir. I know Catherine loved noir too. Actually, I believe Catherine had to do her thesis in undergrad on noir because she wasn't allowed to do it on Agatha Christie, because she was told that wasn't serious enough.
Unreal. Oh my
God. Hopefully that wouldn't happen now, although let's be honest, it probably would in some places. But we can love lots of different things, and I think you're really doing so many different things here, and the intimacy of her voice being such a conflicted character just creates for a really bumpy read in the best of ways, because you're just sort of like you're sort of like ricocheting and going all over the place with this person who is just constantly grappling, struggling with herself and with the world while she is investigating these various mysteries. And there's just a lot going on. And I actually want to talk specifically about New Orleans, because you really do have such a specific sense of place in these books. And I'm actually just going to quote from Divine Ruin now to give listeners a sense of your prose and the way that you evoke your setting in these books. So just bear with me a second here. This is the opening to chapter 9 of Divine Ruin. Monday, dusk. Sweet olive and jasmine strangled the air as I walked to catch the streetcar to the Redemption Agency office. Such a lingering, wet scent. Close, too close, like a garrote around my neck. The swollen tides of late May flowers sagged, drunk on the heat. Wasps had built empires in their eaves. It seemed like every petal had a pulse, and each sunflower was a head nodding with terrible knowledge. So lush, slow, and crawling it all was. Eden before the fall. Love it. And there's so much of that. Like there's so much of that sort of like lyrical writing in these books, which is just, it's just the writing just has so much texture to it, and it's really such a joy. So congrats on that. But also, I mean, what is your connection to New Orleans, and why is the setting so important to these mysteries? Why did you choose to set it there beyond the convent setting, which I understand having a little bit of a closed circle sort of thing going on there?
Oh, yeah. Well, thank you so much for reading that. And you just have the most incredible voice. So, I think setting at its best is indistinguishable from character, and yet it is a Rorschach test. It can pull out and tease out and force out certain kind of aspects or even reactions in characters. And New Orleans itself is just this mystery. To me, in so many ways, it's, I think, the most important American city. It's very caricatured, and yet, it has truth to it, of course. I was just there for the fabulous Tennessee Williams Festival and the Saints and Sinners LGBTQ Lit Festival, which was extraordinary. And, having to walk through the quarter and realizing like, oh yeah, there are these great contradictions, and it's a city like anything else. And it's a very strong spiritual and religious city too, with this just melange of every representation and denomination. From I remember the first time I was there many moons ago, and actually it's in the book, it's in Scorched Grace. I literally went into a corner shop, like you would, bodega, for example, and it was in the Bywater, and you could quite literally buy a bar of soap and a spell. That was legit. It felt legit. I don't know. There's just energy around it. I just thought this place is incredible. I had the great opportunity to work there for 2 years, and I go back at least once a year for part of the research for my series. And there are 4 books in the Sister Holiday series. It's going to be 4 and done. I had the arc in mind, for as much as I love our queen, Agatha Christie, and also Sue Grafton for the Kinsey Milhone series and Louise Penny. I aspire to that greatness. But for this series, I was like, it's either going to be 3 or 4 and done. So I want that urgency of New Orleans to come through every book. And it's a place of miracles and curses. It's a place of acts of God and great vice and great masquerade. And all of that is so thematically propulsive for me as I think about mysteries. And so I was like, you know what? I'm just going to kind of tackle it all in that very maximalist, minimalist way that I feel like is what I love about sort of the canonical noirs, where it's it's so high style, but yet can be cut to the bone at the same time. I mean, I still struggle for that, but that's New Orleans to me. It's yes, it's overgrown, it's lush, but it's also very secretive too. And so it just felt like the perfect place. And it just keeps giving gifts like nature itself. Is when I listen, I learn. And when I'm there, I just try to just absorb. And I'm so grateful for the opportunity to go back and be part of that world for a little while. And yeah, I could talk on and on about it, but I think those are the salient points.
Yeah, that all makes a lot of sense. It really is the perfect setting, I think, for these books, and it is there on every page. And I'm not surprised, honestly, to hear that you're doing, you're doing 4, that it's sort of a finite thing, because you are in such a high gear in these books that I would be worried for you if you were yeah, I'm going to write maybe 20, 30 of these. I'd be like, really? Because that's, you kind of, and, I also now as someone who's writing a series as well, I mean, I'm about to start the 4th one in my series, and 4 feels like a lot. And it makes me I'm in such awe that Agatha Christie, has these 2 long-running series, 33 Poirots, 12 Miss Marples, not even counting the short stories. But I do understand why she was so light on them as well. There's such staying power in the way that I think she portrayed them and gave herself the room to let the mysteries kind of take over. And I think that's the only way you can write such a long running series in that way. That's one model. This is sort of a I've never made this distinction before, but I actually feel like this is it's a shorter series model versus a longer series model. Does that make sense?
Perfectly said. I think that's right on, spot on. And that's the play. I mean, that's part of the aesthetic is like, what do you want to do with your series and how do you envision it? And what, there's like, I envision my four, and I don't know about you, I would imagine just from reading your tremendous books, is like, they are kind of a mega narrative where, yes, you can read Divine Ruin first and Scorched Grace, but in some ways, I just think that they're actually one big book. And I don't necessarily think that has to be a governing principle for all of the Marples or Tuppence Atami or Poirot's, like in the same kind of way where there's a connective tissue. Because for me, I think that's exactly right, is like, this is a shorter model, a shorter series. There's like a macro arc for me. And when I think about Poirot, even in The Murder of Roger Ackroyd, one of the favorite things that I love reading about him in this book is how much he sweetly talks about Hastings in the Argentine and his friendship. But it's not, he's an iconic character, at least the way I read him, is like, we're not reading to go on a journey of transformation with Poirot. He feels like he goes into a space and the world changes around him. Yeah. Whereas the opposite is true in my books, hopefully, where she's a dynamic character. The world stays the same. It stays broken. There's no restoration of order necessarily at all, but she changes. And so the four of them, I'm like, I just want, each one feels like a hazing, Kemper. I swear to God. I'm like, I'm wrung out like a rag after each one. And I think these are the books, that's their cadence. They're absolutely bonkers, but hopefully they feel like that wild ride, not a thriller because they don't have a thriller structure, but thrilling. And that, I think, is also when I'm in a different mindset. I want more of an ebb and a flow, more of that, like, okay, wait a second. When I'm reading Agatha Christie, I write down the clues. Like, I am in it to win it, honey. I'm like, it's like playing a game. And I think while I have clue work very, very intentionally, and I use various, like an imbrication of clue strategies in my books that are definitely across the like SS Van Dyne's rules of mysteries and like all those fair play ideas, but I like twist them and warp them and all that stuff, but it's not the same emphasis. So time, I think, feels really different in my books too. I don't know about you. Do you feel like you have more of that like even though you have some exceptional quiet moments in your books, but like foot to the accelerator, like pedal to the metal feeling with your four?
Yes. And I thank you for sort of like enunciating it, because I don't think I've ever really put it into words myself, like even internally. And I love what you said about in Christie, often Poirot and Miss Marple, it's like the world itself changes. They never change, versus in your series, the world is what Sister Holiday is coming up against, and the world never changes, but she does by the end of the series, which probably, and that too is why I think the New Orleans setting, to have just this character, it's such a cliche when people talk about the setting being a character, but you're right. Like, she's constantly kind of butting against it or interacting with it, and like, it's immovable, and she is kind of going through this journey. And that's very different from what Christie is doing in those long kind of overarching series. And absolutely, I think my model is much more in line with yours. I think there is something a little bit more contemporary about that, because I guess it's a little bit more of an emphasis on, you could say, character and even specifically psychology, the sort of internal sense, one's internal sense of oneself. Not that Christie didn't do that. Just look at Endless Night. Endless Night is one of her more, that book feels very contemporary, 21st century contemporary when you read it now. So again, because Christie did everything, you could always pick an example to support any argument. But that's really, really interesting. I like the way that you expressed that.
Thanks. Likewise. I'm thinking about your episode as well with Alex Michaelides, who's one of my favorites and who I actually teach in one of my classes. I teach the silent patient, and I know how much he still continues to be inspired by Agatha Christie, and that isn't it glorious? Like we can, that's the beauty of genre, is it's fluid but stable. It's like that's what I think is just so exciting and why it continues to be so enduring and popular on the bestseller list, but also rigorous and craft kind of based and like master classes in some of these structures that are very unique. Because even in something like when I read The Silent Patient, I was just kind of seeing those echoes, but totally different than The Murder of Roger Ackroyd because of that narrator, the quote unquote unreliable narrator, but just oh my God, the glorious sleight of hand that is just so exceptional.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, I think that the crime fiction, if each genre is a box that authors are sort of put in, where it's like, what's your box? Because you have to sell books. You have to be known for a certain box. And sometimes, people rail against that, and I understand why. But crime fiction is like one of the most expandable sort of, boxes that exist, because there's so many different things you can do. There's so many different ways that you can express yourself and still say, yeah, I'm writing crime fiction. And that's really why I was so eager to talk with you, because I do think you're doing something very different, but in so many ways, in so many deep and fundamental ways, a bit Christie-like. And I actually want to talk about another aspect of these novels, which is the way that you engage with the world around you. Because as I already mentioned, that's another thing that I think you have in common with Christie. And like her, you really don't shy away from social commentary, or I should say Sister Holiday doesn't really shy away from social commentary. And there's one notable little diatribe in the novel that I wanted to read out so that we can discuss it. This is Sister Holiday. She's investigating. She is rooting through a student's phone here in the course of her investigation. And this is what she says. I looked through Joey's camera roll. Concert pictures and selfies in his bedroom. I saw his trumpet case in the background as he crouched to show off his white sneakers. Still pristine because he cleaned them obsessively, like every teen trying to control their little corner of the universe. When everything's possible and impossible. We can't stop making movies about that time, that age, writing books about it. We're all chasing that lightning, the fury and madness and beauty of feeling alive, the big, bold verb of being. And while we're romanticizing teenage lives in pain, we're failing teenage bodies, failing their minds, colonizing their attention. The men in power, cannibals with long resumes, see kids as demographics, users, followers in the Pied Piper's death march, new consumers to bring online, future workers to exploit, unsullied lands to strip mine. They didn't see Joey's polished Pumas, his trumpet case, covered in stickers from every NOLA jazz club that let him sneak in. They didn't see the perfection of children who enter this earthly realm pure, dimpled baby hands reaching for warmth and care. They don't see the suffering. Or maybe they do and they feed on it. Because in a system that rewards groupthink and carnage, kids with empathy, curiosity, and free spirits are the biggest threats of all. Hail Mary, please, burn it all down. And that last bit is in italics, which is, lots of those little asides as well in the book. I love that passage because I was just sort of nodding my head as I was reading it. And, I don't think you see, though, a lot of this sort of commentary in a lot of crime fiction, or at least certain types of crime fiction, because I think that when people talk about genre fiction, there is this idea that entertainment and edification, or at least entertainment and enlightenment, are at odds with each other. And I really don't like that dichotomy. I try to push back on it whenever I can. And I think your books are a great example of a series that is doing both things at once. And I just wondered how intentional that is, how what you think about that potentially false dichotomy, and just how you approached all of that as you were writing these books.
Well, again, thank you so much for reading that. I just, it means so much to me, just on every level. And I will never stop, kind of feeling so grateful for connecting with extraordinary minds like yours. So thank you. I think for me, it's character opens plot for me, even though I know that I adore and want to really inhabit that hard-boiled or lone wolf space. I do think, though, that character drives. So for me, it's like, what is Sister Holiday seeing as she's flipping through these pictures or holding this phone, which is this extension of a brain at this point? So I ask, what would the character think and do and say? And inevitably, because we have a woman who is unapologetically, loudly and proudly queer, and also about to take her permanent vows as a nun, not apologizing for either aspect of her life. So in a hierarchical institution such as Catholicism, someone who deeply believes in God, so she's like constantly swimming upstream. She's an individual that she's a believer who also totally distrusts authority. So for me, it would feel almost inauthentic not to have these popping off rants that I never want to decelerate. I love nothing more than just a character putting you in a headlock and just running ahead, like in, again, The Murder of Roger Ackroyd, where it's like a slow headlock with Dr. Shepard, but, the intimacy of the first person in crime fiction to me is such a gift. And it's also radical and it's calculated and all of that, but it's just so immediate and intimate. So these moments where she goes on these kind of tears, they have to feel materially like they are holding space in the scene, because I believe deeply in scene work as well. But I like variety. I like creative swings. I like weirdness. I love weirdness, as a matter of fact. So anytime I'm like, oh, ratios are off, I'm like, screw it. This is art. We're making art. It has to feel useful, necessary, unless it's, there's more of a maximalist kind of punk moment or something like that. So I'm very aware of where the reader is. But if you're going to follow this kind of tatted up hot mess of a nun sleuth through the fires of New Orleans, I think, for better or for worse, whether you totally hate what she's saying, whether you think she is completely annoying, or whether you are headbangingly in agreement with her, either way, I think the strength of voice is so crucial to me that I'm willing to take those risks also. But I do think about them, a lot of traditional crime fiction craft books are like, no polemics, no politics, story leads. These are the rules, follow the rules. And I'm just like, I can't. That's not how I write. And even again, genuflecting to the altar of Christie, she breaks the rules all the time. And that's part of what keeps it real, keeps it agile, keeps it feeling alive. And so, long answer to your question, I'm super aware of it. And it's like some of the other characters call her out on it too. Specifically, Ravo kind of is the avatar for the reader more so than even her in some ways. So I like having fun with it. And I think I also am just I believe that art is not neutral. I don't think craft is neutral. There's a great book called Craft in the Real World by Matthew Salesses that looks at, the vestiges of white supremacy and heteronormativity and Americanism in terms of like what we think is quote unquote good writing or bad writing and how flattening it is. And so I really try to take that counter argument and look at it from Sister Holiday's perspective. So she's feeling a lot of feelings in that moment. So I was like, you know what? It's time for her to pop off.
Yep.
That was it.
Don't touch that dial. We'll be back in a moment with the rest of our episode. We just wanted to take a moment to ask you, our dear listeners, for a favor.
If you haven't already done so, we would very much appreciate it if you take a moment to, give us a rating or a review wherever you're listening to this podcast.
It really helps the podcast out because ratings and reviews make it much easier for other Christie fans such as yourselves to find our podcast.
And the more ratings and reviews we get, the more people we can reach.
It should take you a matter of seconds, and lucky you, we're going to provide you with those seconds right now, so go to it.
Thank you so much. And now, back to our regularly scheduled programming.
You get the sense reading these books, you are not someone who is consulting the manual saying like, oh no, I'm a quarter of the way through the book. I have to insert a dead body or else, the rules will be broken. But there's so much of that in mystery writing. Like there really is, because there's so many mysteries out there. And some, by the way, like there's a place for that. Like some people like the predictability of certain mysteries, and you can by those mysteries. And like, that's fantastic. And by the way, a lot of people who read all of those mysteries also read stuff like your books, and lots of other authors, because they have different moods and they're just big readers and they like to consume a lot of different things, and they might have their predictable books and then they'll have their unpredictable books. These things don't have to be mutually exclusive, but yeah, it is a risk. I mean, I know that as a writer as well. I have literally been scolded by readers I used the example of the dead body. I've never talked about this before on the podcast, because I don't like to talk too much about my writing, because that's not the purpose of this podcast. It's really an Agatha Christie podcast, but I love that period before there's a death in a mystery, because I think you're part of the suspense is, well, who's going to die? Like, what is this mystery going to be? Like what is the nature of the crime even going to be? So I like extending that as long as possible. And I also sometimes get a little fatigued by investigatory hijinks. So if that ends up kind of slimming the middle portion of the investigatory portion, it's not necessarily the worst thing in the world. Every book is different. Obviously, there are some books that require lots and lots and lots of very robust and interesting investigation, but you have to be true to your own interests and then your own the voices that you're creating in these stories. So the rules are truly there to be broken. I mean, that's why S.S. Van Dyne and Ronald Knox, they did those tongue-in-cheek rules, because even in the act of writing them, they knew that they were literally being broken left and right, and that those were some of the more interesting mysteries being created, such as the murder of Roger Ackroyd.
I love it. Exactly.
Yeah. No,
exactly.
that's really, that's fantastic.
And thanks for sharing that too about your process. We, your fans, always want to know about your process. And I think the way we read and the way we write are really connected. I think like reading broadly, and, there's actually some interesting scholarship by Neil McCaw out of the UK about how reading is a form of writing. Look it up. It's really cool. I'm just constantly amazed by what happens to my brain when I just simply do take on this ancient technology of a book.
Yeah. I'm going to think about that next time I'm beating myself up for not writing enough. I'll be like, well, I'm reading, so, I have been writing.
A fresh financial you is closer than you think. With MyFICO, you can get the right score for your credit goal, including your FICO scores used for mortgages, auto loans, and credit cards. MyFICO provides your FICO score straight from the people that created it. And you can compare your FICO scores and credit reports from all three bureaus, Experian, TransUnion, and Equifax, side by side. Understanding your credit has never been easier. So use MyFICO to get a clearer picture of your credit in 2026. Visit myfico.com or download the MyFICO app to get started today.
Insurance isn't one size fits all. That's why drivers have enjoyed Progressive's Name Your Price tool for years now. With the Name Your Price tool, you tell them what you want to pay, and they'll show you options that fit your budget. So whether you're picking out your first policy or just looking for something that works better for you and your family, they make it easy to see your options. Visit Progressive.com. Find a rate that works for you with the Name Your Price tool. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law.
I did just want to pull this quote, actually, not from your book this time, but from your bio, from one of the sort of bios that I found online, doing my little bit of pre-interview research, and talk a little bit about it, because I think this too relates quite directly, actually, to Christie scholarship. As a co-editor of the Elements in Crime narrative series with Cambridge University Press, you, Margot, strive to reshape crime writing scholarship with a focus on the contemporary, the future, inclusivity, and decoloniality. And the reason that I'd like to discuss this is that, as you know, as a listener of this podcast, Catherine Brobeck and myself, we never shied away from the issue of what we came to call Christie's depictions stuck in their time, those elements of a novel pertaining to various aspects of identity, race, creed, gender, sexual orientation, perceived disabilities. There's a very long list, which struck us from our humble, extremely subjective vantage point nearly 100 years after the initial publication of many of these books as being presented in an outdated way and thereby unintentionally jarring and detracting from the read. So that is why we deducted points for depictions stuck in their time when we were doing our ranking project for the 66 full-length novels. And part of the reason that I think it's important not to shy away from that issue is that it really is an inclusivity problem. I think many people today might pick up an Agatha Christie novel and for various reasons feel like it is very much not written for them. So I just have to ask you, how do you approach this issue as to Christie, but also as to crime fiction in general, both as an editor and a writer? Because it sounds like something that you deal with directly.
Oh, absolutely. And I love this question. And I have felt it. I have lived it. Reading Marlowe slapping Carmen Sternwood like 35,000 times, hyperbole, but, slapping her from the laudanum and like loving it. And, just the femme fatale of Phyllis Nerdlinger in Double Indemnity, who she was kind of amazing, by the way. But so believe me, I felt it. I hear it. And when I read, when I reread Murder of Roger Ackroyd, that word, difficult words that don't need to be necessarily said right here, right now, out of context. To that, I also say it's an invitation. It's a double dare, find what resonates. As the terrific author Charles Baxter says, pay attention to your attention. And we can never deracinate a text from the time and place it was written. We just can't do it. So therefore, how can we be our own sleuths about it? How can we read it with a sense of wholeness? We don't read in a vacuum. We don't live in a vacuum. And that's the danger, I think, of the current political moment. The many, many dangers and slow detonations of the, kind of characterizations of what inclusion actually is. So I would say if you're new to Christie, The Murder of Roger Ackroyd is 100 years old, which is amazing. Happy B-Day to our devious Dr. Shepard. I would just say, start where you start. Meet the world where it is. Let it meet you. That's what's also fun about book talk or, again, the adaptations, like reaching my family through PBS, in Scranton, Pennsylvania. Like the beauty of art is that it's going to find certain people at different times in their life. And that idea of being excluded is very real. It can hurt. It really does hurt. It can be enervating. It's like, this is so tiring. And I think it's a great invitation to innovate, to complete the canon, as Felicia Rose Chavez says. So for me, that's exactly what I did. I was like, I don't see enough, kind of the queer representation in a noir inflected mystery that I really want to see. And so I wrote it. And similarly, for, anyone coming to these texts or adaptations for, or even the discursive space about it, like if there's something that resonates with you, the idea of a puzzler, the idea of something hiding in plain sight, the art of omission, like everybody's guilty, but what are they guilty of? Whatever aspect of the magic of the Christieverse is like, find something that you kind of holds your attention or seizes you, follow that. And then, bring yourself into that conversation with your art, your film, your book, your short story, do a reverse flip on it. It's still in many ways, I think, an honor to the art itself. And in some ways, even more of a tribute where if you almost write like an anti, or like, again, a decolonial mystery where it's not the quote unquote foreigner, but in some ways, again, like sidebar, Poirot is a foreigner who's like the hero. So I think there's a lot of subtlety as well and nuance with what Christie was doing. And that's an act of sleuthing as well, is like, how can we look at what was written and when, and ask, what does this open? What does this catalyze? What questions does this ask, in terms of like even the subversion of a classic detective and a loyal sidekick trope or whatever. So I just think I look at it as a huge invitation, even when there's a problematized text. It is not so problematized that it cuts off our resonance or innovation. And in fact, it's the exact opposite.
Yeah, I love that answer. And I think that answer is proof of how important it is for the texts as originally written to always be available, because
Always.
we need, we need to be able to interact with it. And the people who are going to deeply read, deeply think about, and then deeply respond to, perhaps writing their very own mysteries, or, writing a scholarly article, or just having a conversation with someone, like whatever, that needs to be there. I'm also curious, I'm just going to ask a corollary question to this, because there is an argument to be made. Well, that's all well and good, but there are lots of people who just want to read casually and just want to read something that is going to entertain and not upset. And for those people, maybe we should change the text and take out certain things and make it more palatable. How do you feel about that? And I'm really not asking this question because I'm like, well, here's the right answer and here's the wrong answer. I think this is such a hard thing for very good reason, right? So you're clearly someone who just kind of has thought about all of these things. So I don't go here with everyone, but I am with you.
Yeah.
And I'm actually like really curious just to hear your thoughts on that.
I think it's it's actually a really beautiful question, because again, it's about art. Art is the human experience, and we can always ask, who will be hurt by this? Who will be helped by this? But it's in some ways, as I come to it, I wouldn't look at it so much as changing. Personally, this is just one girlie's opinion over here, but I wouldn't necessarily take the time to change what was written. I would have more conversations around it. And that's exactly what I do when we have really challenging material, really exigent material that involves horrific language, ideas, ideologies. Talk about it, because it's there. It's not going to go away. And in fact, I think it's dangerous not to look at the realities actually in the whole palette of human emotion and, again, motivation. And talk about it, pull it apart, discuss it, debate it. Friction and polish go together, right? Like we get things that are polished by kind of, exfoliating it, as it were. So it's like the more we can talk about it, the better. And so for that reason, I think original texts, then again, there's nuance, of course. Like, how broad do you want to take something? Like, I know, certain original titles, for example, of "And Then There Were None," really problematic. So where do we keep the packaging and where do we change it and why?
Right.
Internal text, let's have a debate. Let's have a great faith debate about it. And again, like when I reread the word queer in the kind of history and, the genealogy and the evolution of the word queer is very, very personal for me. And, talk about, get some of the 1920s, 30s, 40s canonical noir. And then even like in the Black Mask magazine for Hard Boiled, it's like, oh, brace yourself, honey, because we're in for an onslaught. And what can we take away from it? How can we throw an M80 into it with our art? Because that's what art does. We can use ekphrasis and all that. So I think it's nuanced, but I am a strong advocate for the fidelity of a text for a variety of reasons.
That is an excellent answer. I really love what you said about, if you're going to put a lot of effort and work and time into addressing this issue, maybe put that effort into talking around it rather than changing it. But I also love that you acknowledge it's like, bright line rules never really hold, right? So it's like, yeah, in the case of And Then There Were None. And by the way, that's something that was even done, I did not realize this until Catherine and I covered And Then There Were None for the podcast, but in my mind, it was always its original offensive title until many years later, at which point it turned into a slightly less offensive title, and then There Were None. Not really the case. It was immediately And Then There Were None in the U.S., and Christie knew it and okayed it. Like I have no idea how happy or unhappy she was with the fact that it had to be changed. But for American audiences, the decision was made in 1939. No, this is not going to fly. Yes. And I don't think many people I don't think there are many people out there that are so hardcore about fidelity to text that would say, no, if Agatha Christie wrote that title and by the way, had that word many, many times in the text itself, it has to be there. I think, so it's, where does the line lie? But that's also part of the talking, right? The talking and the debating and the doing all of that work of like, okay, well, maybe sometimes it does make sense to do it, but let's figure out why and look at specific examples and just kind of go from there rather than applying, some sort of a rule to, okay, we're going to change every single instance of like these 10 words or something like that.
Exactly. Pair something that's contested, objectionable, hurtful, pair it with something more expansive. I always do that. I love nothing more than a counter argument. So, like there are multiple examples, but I would say that for anyone who's thinking about that, or you're also teaching, or you have a book club, and I love that. It shows that we care. So, the ways that we talk about it, even the idea of sometimes of a content warning for folks with anxiety, they're really helpful. Like for me, I have zero, even though I'm a crime writer, like I have zero threshold for anything with animal violence. Like I have to know that it's coming. So that's the only time I'll really look up a content warning. Mm-hmm. And what does it do? It lets me enter into the world of the art. So I think it's like one size fits none, and I think nuance is the way forward. And just think about how we can always broaden the discourse. So pairing something like with an objectionable idea or a colonial idea with a decolonial idea. One of the series that I love in terms of decolonial Christie style puzzlers is Gigi Pandian, who's, if I'm not mistaken, one of the co-founders of the Crime Writers of Color. And she has the most fun locked room puzzlers that are just like beautiful conversation pieces with Christie. A lot of her locked room, kind of impossible crime puzzlers. And they are from the perspective of, I'm not even going to give it away, but just like in terms of that decolonial and expansive take, that's like the way that I feel so much a part of the conversation that honors it and also paves the way forward. It's like we can look backwards and look forwards at the same time when we honor the original text too. Yeah. And it doesn't mean agreeing with it. That's the other thing too. It's like, it's not a rubber stamp,
Yep. I mean, and I also love what you said where, it's in some ways the ultimate compliment when you are engaging with the text and even, vehemently disagreeing with it and having all sorts of thoughts on it. I remind myself of that. This is just going to be the episode where I talk about writerly things with you, which I love. But, I'm sure you've had this experience as well. You get an email from a reader who's like, I do not like these various things that you did, even if it's like pointing out what they think are mistakes or something. And I always have to remind myself, I'm like, the fact that this email exists right now, that someone took the time after reading my book to click on my name, like, on my website, however they got the email, they did the work to get my email and then wrote me a message like, this is a win. Like, this is a win. This is engagement. Like, so it really is the ultimate compliment. Like, and it's also the more is more principle, which I think is kind of the overarching ethos of Christie because there's so much of it, but like more is more. Like the answer is always just to pile more on if you can.
I couldn't agree more. I love it. Yes. And I think again, that it's the gift that keeps on giving because through some of these conversations and questions, we get to, I don't know, unlock certain ideas, synthesize in new ways. And they're not mutually exclusive. So again, I think that's right. I love that.
I'm curious beyond Agatha Christie and beyond, some of the noir writers that you've already mentioned. Do you have any other mystery authors who you would count as really big influences for this Sister Holiday series, or I guess even just any other authors that you love and who you'd recommend? Like, I know that you're really widely read, and I would just love to hear if there are any other either classic or contemporary authors who have just been important to you as a reader, but I guess in particular as a writer.
My holy trinity right here. S.A. Cosby, Tana French, and Gillian Flynn, who I have the incredible, I won the lottery because she's my publisher, but she's one of my influences still continually forever because of her exceptional craft, but just delicious weirdness and taking big creative swings, being unafraid, unapologetic. Tana French, as your fans know, because we listened to that extraordinary interview with her a couple of years ago. I can't think of, these three, S.A. Cosby, Tana French, and Gillian Flynn, every book is just, it's like a case study. It feels like a friend, even when there's an axe murder. There's just nothing I always pre-order, whatever S.A. Cosby and Tana come out with. It's like Christmas morning, but again, commitment to an original aesthetic, taking chances, trying new things out, being wild swerves. And then, of course, that deeply, deeply political engagement. And we see that in S.A. Cosby's work. All the Sinners Bleed, King of Ashes, which was so ghastly and harrowing and wild. And, my favorite book by S.A. Cosby, Razor Blade Tears, which is so exquisite. I can't recommend them enough. Very, very violent, high style in terms of violence and gore, into part of his aesthetic interest. And so really different, those three, but those are the three that I just keep, I hold their books next to my heart and feel so grateful that their characters live in my head. And it's just very sacred. It's very fun. It's very rock and roll.
I love that. That is a fabulous holy trinity. So you already mentioned that there's a fourth Sister Holiday book. Are you working on that right now?
Yeah, it's called Ravaged Light, and it is going to be closing out our quartet. I don't think there's going to be any prequels, and I think everything that Sister Holiday has to tell me kind of comes out, on the page. But Ravaged Light is, I should be done with it in a couple of months, and that'll probably be out in 2028.
And do you have plans? Because, you're a poet, you're obviously, your interests are wide ranging within the world of literature. Are you planning on doing more crime fiction? You might not even know at this point, but I'm just curious beyond Sister Holiday, what your plans are.
Yeah, I would love to. I have some ideas for a couple of standalones, and I think they'll be different. There's one I have in mind, more of a kind of identifiable noir, as it were. And I love gallows humor. I think every single thing that I write is going to have some wicked humor in it, because I think that's just part of my sensibility, even though my characters will change dramatically. But I think, after Ravaged Light, it's going to be definitely, I want to keep growing. I want to keep growing as a writer. Just like our queen, it's I want to be surprising to myself and to readers in the same way that I love from other writers too.
Absolutely. And, we were talking about adaptations of Christie. Is there any activity there on the adaptational front for your books?
Yeah, there is, which is really exciting. And of course, as you know, I'm sure yourself, that it's hard to talk about unless things are final, but yeah, the series is optioned. It's optioned by extraordinary producers. There's some really exciting writers on it. Let's just say this, All About Agatha will be first to get the news when, things can hopefully continue to progress. But yeah, that was really exciting to get that information. And again, the whole ecosystem is so fun. And, things change from page to screen as many of your guests have talked about as well. The difference between viewing and reading, and the difference between the picture and the kind of texture of the line. But I'm like, you know what? Can take it and run with it, because I think it's like there's such different entities, I guess it were. So I'm going to be along for that ride.
Well, I will report that out with glee whenever it's something that can be public. But yes, these things are so tenuous until they're not.
Yeah, right. And, you're also very much involved with the screen, yes? Right? Screenwriting?
Yeah. I mean, I was, I made my start as a manager to screenwriters. So I sort of am living in LA and with friends and family. Yes. I mean, it's difficult to live out here and not at least have a toehold in that world. So I definitely have a little bit more than a toehold. And yeah, it's all a wild ride, but that's fantastic. And then finally, I'm going to have to end our conversation the way I do with almost everyone on this podcast and force you to choose between Monsieur Poirot and Miss Marple. Who's it going to be?
Oh, this is impossible, Kemper. Okay. Oh my goodness. I got to go with Miss Marple.
Yeah.
I do. There's just... I feel like she knitting and just smirking, and there's a sort of superiority with her quiet brilliance and snark, and oh God, there's just like it never loses its appeal when you're reading along and just the stitching together. And not that the man with throwing the vegetable marrows. And by the way, when I had to first look up, I was like, what on earth is a vegetable marrow? But I think, her sort of delightfully, like, not just smirking delight, is just like her brilliance is to me something that brings me such joy and comfort. And I never, ever get tired of any of it. But it's like, I feel like there's just always something to discover or rediscover with Marple. What about you? Have you answered this question?
Oh yes, I'm Miss Marple.
Okay,
I'm Miss Marple all the way. So I'm very happy that you answered correctly. But no, it's and I was going to say, I mean, between the vegetable marrows in Murder of Roger Ackroyd and then the references to pumpkins and Halloween Party that Mrs. Oliver makes, which are just bizarre. Where you're like, are we talking about the same vegetable? I'm not really sure. There's a lot of gourd uncertainty, I think, in the works of Agatha Christie. That's a little known fact, but
another investigative line.
Yeah. It's funny because I was thinking about this question though in relation to your books, and I think that there's oddly a lot more like direct DNA linkage, if that phrase makes sense, between a lot of the Poirot books and the Sister Holiday books, just in that we have so much first-person narration and the closeness kind of and the puzzliness functions, I think, similarly in your books as it does in a lot of the Poirots, whereas the Miss Marples can sometimes be a little bit fuzzier, a little bit based on instinct versus physical clues, which is why she lays her traps. And even though we do have first-person narrated Miss Marple novels, they're usually narrated by people who are not super close to her. So there's a lot of distance between the reader and Miss Marple, which makes sense for who she is and how Agatha Christie portrays her. That's very different from Sister Holiday. But then you can see, so it's just a little bit more of an indirect connection. So I really wasn't sure who you were going to say. I would have accepted either, but as I said, I'm glad that you answered correctly.
Well, I'm sure you've mentioned this and I've heard it, but if you could distill why Team Marple for you, I personally would just love to hear it.
I mean, the real answer for me is probably not a very satisfying one, which is just she's where my heart is. Like, Miss Marple, I adore those books. And I think a lot of the Miss Marple books are a little bit more I think that so many of those Poirots and especially the Poirots in the 30s, but that have those gonzo high concepts, they really are built around plot. And for many people, that's why they prefer Poirot, right? Because there are a lot of people that say, well, Agatha Christie, there was no one better at creating these puzzles and pulling off these tricks. And it's true, but I think the reason that Christie endures as much as she does, which is, to be clear, more than anyone else from the Golden Age and practically from any other age, any other genre at this point, is that, yes, she was doing that, but she was doing a lot of other stuff as well. And I think that the non-high concept nature of some of the Miss Marples. A Murder is Announced is a very high concept Miss Marple, so I don't want to paint with a broad brush, but the non-high concept nature of a lot of those Miss Marple novels is actually why I love them and why they are as dear to me as they are. So yeah, and it just from a young age, I just like locked in on her, and the rest is 10 years worth of podcasting.
I agree. Just her knitting and, smiling, it's so indelibly burned in my brain. And then also that, calling everyone dear. And, I remember that even the Tuesday Murder Club, that starting I don't have it in front of me, but it starts with something about life being a mystery. So it just is so inviting, even when there's mischief and mayhem and murder. There's just a warmth. Yeah.
Yeah, it just feels like some of Christie's best writing, It's just it's Christie at her best. So, and most almost like holistic, if that makes sense. It's like everything is kind of firing on all cylinders. Whereas sometimes with the Poirots, there can be a little bit of like an unevenness of different elements. But again, to be clear, now I'll get in trouble with the Poirovians out there. Many of those are also some of my favorite Christies. So it's all a joy. More is more.
More is more.
I think that's an appropriate place to end. But this was just really lovely getting to speak with you, Margot. And again, thank you for these books. And I'm sure there are many listeners who are already familiar with them. But for those who aren't, I do really think there's just so much in here to delight over as a fan, not just of Christie, but of lots of crime fiction. And yeah, I feel like this is a huge contribution in a lot of different ways to the crime fiction box or umbrella. And I'm thrilled that there's a fourth one coming out. I can't wait to read it. And I'm wishing you the best as you wrap that one up.
Thank you. You are brilliant. Your joy is my joy. And also thanks to everyone listening, because we are a big, wonderful family in the crime and mystery fiction world. We really are. We are some cool cats. So I'm a fan as well. So it's just so fun to be with you and to be in this world. So thank you.
Thank you again to Margot Douaihy. It was such a pleasure to chat mystery and Agatha Christie with her. Margot's work is a little outside of the box, inside of which the contemporary mysteries of authors who tend to be on this podcast lies. She is definitely a little bit more hard-boiled, but as I said many times during our conversation, and as I truly meant, her writing is gorgeous. So I encourage you all to check her out. I have included a link to Margot's work in the show notes. For next week's episode, this is so exciting. Remember when A+++ podcast listener Claire Wells and I did the Doctors of Agatha Christie? Well, as promised, we are back with the Nurses of Agatha Christie in 2 weeks' time. Cannot wait. It's going to be a big episode. Get ready. And speaking of big episodes, I am still basking in the crossover episode that I was able to do with Dr. Mark Aldridge and Gray Robert Brown on the Mary Westmacott novel, Absent in the Spring. That is available on the All About Agatha Patreon account. It is not going to be released on their new podcast endeavor, Westmapod, for a bit of time. So you can go on over to Patreon to check that out. I highly recommend it. It was such a fantastic conversation. You can find the podcast on Instagram at All About Agatha, and you can find me at my author website, www.kemperdonovan.com. Links to both of those in the show notes. As always, I would love for you to get in touch or keep in touch with me over email, allaboutthedame@gmail.com. Don't be a stranger. And I still encourage all of you to pre-order the third book in my Ghostwriter Mysteries series, Sweet Spot, which is out at the end of June. That time is fast approaching. As I mentioned at the top of the episode, please feel free to click on the link to my website, the events page there, which will fill you in on the various places I will be visiting in the United States over the coming months. I love, love, love meeting listeners out on the trail in real life. It really makes me happy, and I think it would make you happy too. Along those lines, give me a rating, give me a review. You'll feel so much better afterward. And I'll see you next time. All right, bye.